So here we have two different images, and they're handled in two different ways. One is, of course, the man, and he can handle a lot more sharpening. The texture in his skin is intensified. It's a good thing. So we'll go ahead and sharpen him first, and we'll sharpen him with quite a bit of sharpening. So let's go filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, and I would hit him with at least the 120, if not a little bit more. Now here's something I want to tell you about the sharpening. If you were sharpening for the web, the sharpening that you see on screen is what you get. And so a typical one that I might use for sharpening, maybe 110, 1 and 10, something like that. That's a one that I use from time to time for the web. It seems to work pretty good. A very lower level of sharpening. Or another one that you can use for anything, is 85, 1 and 4. And that's a setting I've been using for years that just works wonderfully well. But if you're sharpening to print, to actually go out and print to print something, there's a little trick to it. The trick is you over sharpen it by just a little bit. In other words, on screen, it should look a little too sharp. So for this photo that I'm working on here, I would probably push things a bit, and I go, ooh, it's starting to look a little too sharp. When you see it starting to look a little too sharp, stop. That's it. You go just past the point where you think it's right. You go, ooh, just when you start to cringe. That's right. It's going to look funky on screen. It's going to look over-sharpened on screen, but it'll look right when it prints, because some of that sharpening that you see on screen is lost between the screen and the paper. So just over-sharpen just a little bit. Now, because of that reason, a lot of pros will save two versions of their copy, of their image. They'll have, the final and then final for print. And the final for print will be the over-sharpened version. So the final one is one they could put on their website or their portfolio or a slideshow. Then the second one is the over-sharpened version. All right, so I gave you a couple of settings for him. Let's go over ahead and look at sharpening her. Her we have to be much more subtle with, because we don't want to accentuate any texture in her skin. So there are a couple different tricks you can do. One is, of course, to apply the sharpening, just apply less sharpening. And this is going to sound like more sharpening, but it's actually less. 150. 1, but by raising the threshold up to 10, it really kind of softens it down a bit. So it's not quite as bad as it seems. Now these are both low resolution photos because I wanted them to be able to fit on screen fully and you see them in all of their glory. And so this is a little bit too much sharpening for these particular images, but 151 and 10 for a high resolution image from a digital camera, 6 megapixels or higher, works wonderfully well. They look a little over sharpened here, but they'll print wonderfully well. And if I was going to print her instead of 151 and 10, I might go to maybe 170 or something, where it's like, yikes, that's a little too much. Perfect. That's it. If it looks a little too much, it's probably right on the money. And of course, after you apply it, you will go back and choose the fade unsharp mask and switch it to luminosity for sure. Now, if you've written an action for it, of course, you'll just run the action and there you go. It's a done deal. So those are just a couple of things to keep in mind when you're doing your sharpening. Now, there is something else that I would probably do with her. So let's go and revert this back, okay, to where we were before the sharpening. And that is, I'm very, very concerned about sharpening these other areas. There's two things that you could do. One trick that we do, we've done this for a long time when sharpening portraits of women, is to only sharpen the red channel. So you go to the channels palette, there's a red channel, there's a green channel, and there's a blue channel. And if you look, the most texture in her face is in the blue channel. You can really see the texture there. The green channel holds the next amount of skin texture. The red, you notice her skin is almost white. There's not a lot of texture there. So what we would do is you just go to the channels palette, you click on the red channel, and then for the best softness, you'll just sharpen just that particular channel. Now that's a little bit too much sharpening there. Let's bring it down to like 150 maybe. And again, for this low resolution image, this is a 72 DPI image that's only 8.5 inches tall. That's a little bit much. So let's just lower it just so it looks better on screen. But the setting I just showed you, 151 and 10, would be fine for real life. Something in there looks a little bit better. And then you just switch back to RGB and your image is done and it's fine. The other thing that you could consider doing is let's undo those. Revert. There's no reason to do the fade unsharp mask after that. But you could do this. Go ahead and duplicate the layer. apply your sharpening to her. So let's go sharpen, unsharp mask, and apply however much you want. Let's do the 150. Let's do the 170, really make it punchy, because we're going to use that masking trick. Remember how I told you earlier that you would mask so you don't sharpen their skin? That's what we just did. We applied the sharpening to a duplicate of the layer. Hold the Option key on Mac or the Alt key on PC. Click the layer mask icon. So there is now a black cover over that super sharp version. So it's still there, it's just hidden behind this black mask. Now you'll go get a paintbrush and you'll just paint over the areas that can take a lot of sharpening. Like in this case, it would be her hair can take a lot of sharpening. Her sunglasses can take a lot of sharpening, right? And then let's make the brush smaller. By the way, I'm changing brush sizes by using the bracket keys on my keyboard. They're the key that is to the right of the letter P. Okay, then we would come over here and just sharpen the lips, right? They can take it, maybe the nostril, and then this hair over here. So those areas can take a lot of sharpening, but I have not sharpened her skin at all because I haven't painted over her skin. So I've not sharpened there at all. So you can see it before and after. So the whole image looks apparently much sharper, but her skin is not affected at all. Just her lips, her opening the nostril there, her glasses, and her hair. Those are the only areas that are affected. So there's just a couple of different sharpening strategies. Very, very popular ones. You'll see the pros using these all the time. And that's just a great way to kind of finish off. And again, you're going to do that towards the end of your process. These are the final things you do. Now, we're going to look at some problems you're going to run into later in this class or coming up next in the next couple of segments. We're going to look at some problem photos and how to deal with them, because we can deal with an awful lot of this stuff in Camera Raw. But sometimes down the road, after you've left Camera Raw and you're working and you're doing effects and you're doing different things, all of a sudden you think, oh, this image is too dark, or the color is now shifted or whatever. That's why you have to have these extra tools. You have to know how to do them both. And that's what we're going to cover.